we shall go to 1963. And in 1963, Alfred Hitchcock directed and produced a horror film called The Birds. Now, this was based on a screenplay by Evan Hunter. Now, Evan Hunter and Alfred Hitchcock had worked together a lot. Very, very close working relationship. And Evan Hunter adapted The Birds from an existing and rather different short story called The Birds by Daphne du Maurier in 1952. She published it in 1952. And that story was set in Cornwall. Now, the screenplay here was developed between Evan Hunter and Alfred Hitchcock over a period of time and went through a wide variety of approaches. And there's a whole load of other ways this film could have turned out, other than the way at one point they were even considering using a sort of comedy techniques at the beginning until things got serious. Anyway, the story ended up with it involved starting in a pet shop, which sets up the meet cute for the two main characters later in the film, and also involves some birds early on at this stage in the story. Now, most of the birds used in the film are real, but some weren't those. Approximately $200,000 was spent on making mechanical birds, and of the real birds, the gulls were caught in a rubbish dump. Sparrows were caught elsewhere, but for the effect, the sparrows were combined with birds bought from pet shops when they shot the scene where the sparrows invade the house. The special effects included work at Walt Disney Studios using a sodium vapor process. They called it yellow screen, and it was very interesting actually, because this involved not using a blue screen or green screen as we're used to for colour separation overlay, or chroma key as we commonly call it, but yellow screen sodium vapor involved standing in front of a background lit by sodium vapor lights, which is for example the old yellow type of street lights before they changed all the street lights to LED. The old yellow street lights, those were the kind of things. They're sodium vapor lights, and it's a very, very narrow spectral peak, so it doesn't contain any other light other than that particular frequency. And the image is shot simultaneously as two separate images using a beam splitter, and that's a very interesting thing. One reel is normal film stock, and the other is coated with an emulsion that's only sensitive to that particular sodium vapor narrow bandwidth, and that results in very accurate matting with minimal fringing. So that was quite a advanced technique that, we could still be using that today if we hadn't moved over to video. And this was necessary for the bird's wings flapping, because otherwise, if you see on chroma key, very often you get green fringing where there's fast motion, and this prevented that. In the chimney scene, a superimposed extra shot of small birds flying inside a glass container that made it look even more like there were birds, much more birds there than there were. For the crow attack sequence, the big problem to solve was the relative sizes of bird versus the children. So they framed the birds generously and then zoomed in to match the proportional size that they would be with respect to the children in the base layer shot. And the film deliberately goes at a slow pace to build suspense. Tippi Hedren, the actress who plays the leading lady in the film, was not treated at all well by Hitchcock, who obviously fancied her quite a bit, but made her life quite a bit harder than it should have been. For example, in the final attack sequence, she understood the birds would be those mechanical birds, but they were switched at the last minute to use real birds, and she did get hurt quite a lot. The story, although based on Daphne du Maurier's The Birds, was inspired by a situation in August 1961 where a town in America had birds attack the community, seabirds dive bombing the houses and cars, etc. And the soundtrack uses no actual music as such, but rather focuses on sound effects and electronically generated atmospheric and ambient sounds. And these were created on an instrument called the mixter trautonium. And this is a very interesting thing. This preceded synthesizers, but it was a very important and early electronic instrument. It had lots of modules that a subtractive synthesizer would later have, but it lacked the vital ingredient of voltage control, which Robert Moog would invent some years later. And that's how we know about synthesizers now. They're all voltage controlled, or modelled voltage controlled. However, this thing, the mixture trautonium, it actually had formant filters, so it could simulate voice, and it had some subharmonic oscillators. Now that is very interesting. Along with the main pitch, it would generate 4 mixable subharmonics of the main tone. And even today, that's a very interesting means of synthesizing sound. So, The Byrds, 1963. Thank you very much. Have a good week, everyone. Thank you. Bye.